صباح الخير جميعا. بداية نشيد وطني لبنان. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to AUB. My name is Chaaban. I'm an economist and an assistant professor of economics at AUB. I'm also here representing the Issam Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs. I would like to welcome to AUB Ms. Marta Ruedas, the UN Resident Coordinator and the UNDP Resident Representative, and also Ms. Rima, who is the Project Manager for the Institute for Migration Studies at LAU. We're very happy to host today the launching of the UNDP report for 2009, which is on migration and development. We're very pleased to have Ms. Ruedas among us here. Welcome to AUB and welcome to all of you. As the Issam Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs, we focus our work on public policy issues that are relevant to Lebanon and the region. One of our main areas of focus is youth and development, in addition to policy interactions that are between the academia and the world of international affairs. So one of our focuses in this year's program is on migration, and we're very happy to be partnering with UNDP first in the launching of this report, and then with follow-up activities in AUB around migration, youth development, and regional linkages between migration and development. So without further delay, I'd like to pass the floor to Ms. Ruedas for a presentation on the report and follow-up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the media if the presentation. All right, Excellencies and colleagues, thank you very much for coming. We are presenting today this year's Global Human Development Report on Migration and Development, as you've just heard. I'll just give an overview, and then there'll be a little bit more of an in-depth, in-depth look at it. And then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session in case you want to go into any of the issues. The core message of this year's report is essentially that we need to look at migration in a way that is positive, that migration does bring huge gains for human development. What we know, what the human development reports over the years have been saying, are that there are huge differences in human development between regions, within one country, between countries, and migration in and of itself can be a huge asset for human development and reduce these disparities. We know that mobility fosters human development, that there are gains to the individual, to the families, and to the communities that are brought about by mobility, by migration. And we know that the reason for migration is, in fact, to seek better opportunities. That is a human right in and of itself, is to look for better opportunities and to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. So there are a number of policy recommendations that this year's report makes. In brief, it is essentially to improve, to liberalize the channels that allow people to seek employment or opportunities abroad. it's not only people with low skills, but typically people with higher skills have an easier time of finding these channels and of accessing these channels. And in fact, many of the barriers to migration are regressive, so they're much more difficult for people with lower skills. And yet we find that people with lower skills also help human development, both at the receiving country and at the country of origin. So liberalizing channels that allow people to seek opportunities abroad, reducing the transaction costs that this migration has, and we found that many of the places that have, in fact, lower human development have very high transaction costs to leave, and that, for example, the cost of obtaining a passport is often very close to a year's income for a person that would typically be seeking these opportunities. So the transaction costs for migration need to be reduced. Improving the outcomes for migrants at the destination country. Now again, what is frequently found is that there are a number of not necessarily economic barriers and problems that migrants find in the country of destination. Access to services, for example. Obviously, the obvious one is language. A number of issues that need to be eased in order for the benefits to be taken advantage of both by the migrants and by the country of destination. And as well, enabling opportunities for internal mobility. What we find, and you'll see it in the next slide, but not yet, is that actually most migration is in fact internal migration within a single country. And the interest of the country in order to increase the human development level within the country should be, in fact, to improve and enable the opportunities for internal mobility and to improve the opportunities of the migrant in order to raise the economic access of that migrant. So what you see here is, in fact, the numbers of migrants in general. You have nearly 1 billion people on the move. This is annually. Of these, as you can see, the vast majority are in fact internal migrants. Nearly 3/4 actually are internal migrants. Of the international migrants, which are in fact the ones that gain the most publicity, really, 60% actually move between developing countries or between developed countries, not between. Again, what gains the media publicity is migration from developing to developed countries. That is what brings up the resistance in people's minds. That is what comes to the attention of the media. But the vast majority of migration is between one developing country and another, or between two developed countries. Only about 37% move from a developing to a developed country. And that's, as I said, 37% of the 1/4 of migrants in total. So, as you can see, it's a relatively reduced number. And 3%, still 3% move from a developed to a developing country. Just, I've been talking about human development, and this is, after all, the Human Development Report. I should say a word about what is meant by human development. It focuses on three measurable dimensions. One is life expectancy. The second is education. And the third is standard of living. And within these three dimensions, there are a number of indices that are used to calculate the Human Development Index. The index is always a few years behind. That is to say, in this year's report, the 2009 report, we are using figures from 2007. And this is because we have to use figures that are globally comparable. So, one country's statistics may be available for this year, but many countries are far behind. And while since we have to compare countries across the world, we use the year that we can obtain statistics for all countries on. And they're used from international sources, but also from national sources. Maybe I should just say, so we do classify the countries according to the Human Development Index, and maybe we should say that this year, #1 on the chart is Norway, so thank you very much for being here, and congratulations. But so we are looking at human development. We have been since 1990. And we are looking at migration, again, from the point of view of human development. That is to say that it does improve, it improves income, but it also improves education, and it improves health. You can see in this slide that migration, on an average, increases the income of the migrant by 15 times. But it also doubles the education enrollment rates, and it also has improvements, vast improvements in education. What we give here is the reduction in child mortality that ensues, but in fact it's across the board. And again, you know, these things are all connected. An increase in education also has an increase in income associated with it. But they also, I should say, that this is something that talks about the migrant, him or herself. But there are associated gains for the country, the receiving country. Migrants do help boost the economic output at no cost to locals. And research in about 14 developed destination countries show that it increases employment in the country of destination, with no evidence that it crowds out locals, and with evidence that it improves investment within the country of destination. So there is a net benefit to the country of destination beyond what there is in terms of the benefit to the migrant. So I'll just leave it at that. But because there is often this concept that low-skilled migrant workers will push local workers out of their jobs. This is true in certain specific cases, but by and large, the benefits to employment in the country of destination are either, that is to say, there is zero impact, or there is a benefit overall to employment. Getting into this region now. What we find is that this region is one of the ones with the highest growth in migration rates over the past period. As you can see, in 1960 there was a very, very small migration into this region. As of an estimated 2010, obviously based on the growth, we have 8%. And the share of the population has increased vastly as well, the share of the population that is migrating. The percentage of the migrants in the total population is what we are talking about, and it's an incredible increase. The highest country shares are recorded in the Gulf countries and in Southeast Asia. In the Gulf countries, you have, for example, the share of the migrants in the total population in Qatar is 63%, which is enormous, and 56% in the UAE. 47% in Kuwait. So migration as a whole in this region is something that we really need to take a look at and to see how we can take advantage of. Now there are positives and negatives associated with migration in this region. Starting with the negatives, you do get a number of abusive and exploitative working conditions. Now, this is not exclusive to the Arab states, I should say. This is something that takes place in many, many countries across the world. The instinctive reaction of a receiving country initially is, in fact, to throw up barriers, and many of these are in terms of the terms of employment. Migrant women in the Gulf countries are normally are excluded in many places from normal worker protection. And although, well, I'll get to the positive steps that are being taken, this is changing slowly, but this is still a dominant factor of migration in this region. Access to health care, again, not all migrants in this region have the same access to health care. It varies across the region, but overall this is something that is not given the same for migrants as the resident population. And access to education. In some countries, migrant children may not have access to state schools, or their parents may be asked to pay a higher price or higher fees. In Egypt and the UAE, students of migrants with irregular status are not allowed access to schooling or to educational institutions. So these are things that if the country the receiving country wants to take full advantage of the migrant population, I think these are things that need to be addressed. But there are steps that are being taken towards reform in this region, and in recent years, some countries have taken notable steps. Saudi Arabia has recently passed some regulations facilitating the transfer of workers from one employment to another, which is, again, another barrier that is often in place. Other initiatives have been implemented to monitor living and working conditions of foreign migrants in some places. In the UAE, the Ministry of Labor has introduced a hotline to receive complaints. So these 9,000 violations that were reported are, the notable thing is that they were reported. Violations were probably taking place before, but they were not reported, they were not addressed. So the institutionalization of a hotline has been a very important step in order to be able to address these issues. And there are more ambitious proposals for reform as well, such as Bahrain's proposal to abolish the kafala system, the sponsorship system that was necessary beforehand. There have been, the Abu Dhabi dialogue is a recent intergovernmental initiative designed to address transaction costs and other issues in an intergovernmental manner and dialogue. So all of these are steps that are very, very important and very positive for addressing the issue of migration within the region. I can't, of course, pass on to other issues without looking at human development within Lebanon. This is the human development trend within Lebanon over the past few years. What you can see is an overall positive trend in the Human Development Index over the past few years, with some, up and down, but overall a very positive trend. I would say that most of it is based on the economic rather than in the past few years, on the economic rather than the health and education indices. But nevertheless, there is an overall positive trend. What is not so positive, perhaps, and is the rank of Lebanon has gone down. Let's say, although it looks like it's gone down. It's number 83 now out of 177 countries. So what this means is that in comparison with other countries, it is now at number 83. Other countries have improved their human development at a higher rate, perhaps, than Lebanon. So even though Lebanon has had a positive trend, and this is a very good thing, in the comparative scheme, it's maybe going forward at a slower rate. But this is, we see other countries that are doing quite well that also go backwards at a comparative rate. I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the ranking. I would rather take a look at the index. And going then into migration within the context of Lebanon, as you've heard, we are now going into a little bit of we're going to be programming a few things. We're going to be studying the issue of migration within Lebanon. Everybody knows that the Lebanese diaspora is huge. So there is a lot of Lebanese out-migration. Equally, there's a lot of migration to Lebanon. So this is an issue that really needs to be looked at in terms of the benefits to Lebanon of migration. It affects all walks of life, the social, the political life. You get a lot of influence of within all walks of life, ideas coming from the Lebanese migrants abroad, workers coming from migrants to Lebanon. So there are really a lot of opportunities for Lebanon within the issue of migration. But it is something that has not yet been studied to its full degree. Although everybody knows that there is a huge diaspora abroad, nobody really has any accurate figures about this. So, you know, it's really something that we need to take a closer look at. We will be working on this issue with the Issam Institute, with other partners. And we are also going to be looking at some collective initiatives that can have that can bring some benefit from this issue. Most immediately, perhaps, there is one project that we are about to go on. I think at the beginning of November, the first few days of November. This is the Live Lebanon or Live Lebanon. Actually, so you can pronounce it however you want. In cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we in UNDP are going to be launching this project, which will develop a website that can be accessed by Lebanese living abroad. Actually, it can be accessed by anybody, but it's targeted obviously towards Lebanese living abroad. It will have projects on it at the community level, to be implemented at the community level, aimed at the development of specific communities, implemented and managed by UNDP, to which Lebanese migrants or Lebanese living abroad can contribute. And we will be seeking their input into the development of this website to see how it can be improved. We're going to be starting with just 20 some odd pilot projects throughout the country, but eventually the idea is that we will be covering the bulk of Lebanese communities. And so Lebanese living abroad who have this tie to their communities will be able to contribute to specific development projects that will run the gamut from social, environmental, economic projects, or that are genuinely targeted at development, that are identified by the community in association with UNDP and implemented and managed through UNDP. So we will be presenting this more fully at the end of no, not at the end of this month, at the beginning of next month, in the beginning of November. But just to say, this is something that we are attempting as an experiment to see if we can connect the migrants, Lebanese living abroad, to national development in a much more concrete way than usually takes place. Because most often remittances, of course, come, but they go directly to the family. And to some degree or another, there are some projects that are funded also by migrants living abroad, but they tend to be less directly connected to development than might be the case. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much for your interest, and I'll pass on this to
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. And so at the end of the session, you will have time for a Q&A session. And then I think you can get something outside when you're leaving of the report and the press release. So now I'll be presenting a few slides on the Lebanese migration. as you rightly said, migration is at the heart of Lebanon's existence. So most of you here are migrants or originating from migrants, even studied abroad. So what I'll try to do is give you a short picture about what's happening in Lebanon, and migration in Lebanon, with the few information that we have. So the presentation is on brain drain, because as you'll see later, most Lebanese migrants are high-skilled immigrants. So the outline is, like you can see here. First, I'll start with facts on Lebanese immigration and the brain drain, with some new numbers, and then the economic causes of the brain drain. Why do people migrate, and what do they seek when they migrate? Then the economic consequences of the brain drain, and they're very well discussed in the UNDP report about the remittances impact, the impact on education. We'll see what's happening a bit in Lebanon. And then I'll try to ask a question: are there really positive impacts of the brain drain in the case of Lebanon? And I will end with some policy recommendations. This presentation is based on recently published work that you can access on the link here. We can share with you also copies of the presentation later on. So migration in Lebanon is a fact, and I don't need to remind you about this. The recent numbers show that we tend to have almost 550,000 first-time Lebanese immigrants. So these are not second and third generation, these are first-time immigrants. As a percentage of the labor force, in 2000, this represents almost 40% of the Lebanese labor force that is outside Lebanon. And the annual rates of migration, of course, they fluctuate when you have war or when you have severe economic conditions, but the numbers are, according to estimates by St. Joseph's University, our own estimates and other scholars, between 15,000 and 20,000 persons per year. This is the average, so it can be more or less, but this is the average per year. The stock of migrants, most of them are in the Arab Gulf, almost 27%. 150,000 people are in the Arab Gulf. Then the US, Australia, and you can have other countries here. These numbers are, you can say, the latest numbers compiled by several researchers and some estimates for the Arab Gulf. Now, Lebanese migrants are very high skilled. If you look at this graph here, you can see the distribution of migrants according to how many years of education they had. So when you have the blue, it's low skilled, less than 8 years of schooling. The red is medium skilled, and the yellow is high skilled. So for Lebanon, you can see that 44.5% are high skilled migrants. This is to the OECD countries, to Europe, US, and others. Look at Morocco, for instance. Most of their migrants are low skilled. And you can see a huge difference between Arab countries, but for Lebanon, it's a fact that we have really a brain drain. Most people who migrate are university graduates and more. So we did a study in AUB recently in 2009, and we will be also launching this study soon in mid-November, I think. The study showed staggering numbers. Those who graduated between 1995 and 2005, 67% of the males are living abroad. And what's more shocking is females, 45% are living abroad. This is the first time we see this in the last 10 years that we know that males tend to migrate more than females, but now we're seeing also females leaving. 45% of graduate females are abroad. And I'm sure you have, the Lebanese here have most of their friends living abroad, and we can relate to it. St. Joseph University did a very comprehensive study on their migrants. They showed that 21% live abroad. Most migrants are engineering students, medical students, IT, computer students, work abroad. And a significant proportion of those who are graduating now, the students, say they want to leave. 1/3 say they want to leave. These are not really nice figures. Why do people leave? And so we have what we call the push factors that make you leave, and the pull factor that attract you. The pull factor are to your right. Push factors are, of course, political instability, high cost of living, especially for young graduates, the mismatch between education and what the market wants, the tight labor market for skilled graduates, Lebanon is not really creating enough skilled labor opportunities, and regulation for starting a business for entrepreneurs are very cumbersome. As you know, the World Bank report in 2006 showed that you need to wait 1.5 years to get an electricity connection in some areas in Lebanon. You also need to wait 8 months to get a phone line. So, and you can also go down the road on these business legislations. The pull factors are very important for Lebanon, and we tend to live in a region where there is a lot of pull factors. These are first high salaries in the Gulf compared to the Lebanese market, and then more rewarding work environment. And the people we surveyed recently, they cited the rewarding work environment more than their salaries. They wanted to work in a better environment, in a more professional company. And of course, there's an established network of Lebanese abroad. We say that the first Lebanese migrated in the 1850s or something. So it's way before. But this is the one we have a statue for on the port. And then there's opportunities for good graduate studies abroad. Now, what are the economic effects? I'm trying to summarize very quickly. So, negative effects is the loss of the country's human capital. So, we're losing talented individuals. And then we're also paying locally for education that has the returns abroad. So, everything we're paying in terms of public and private spending on education, the very high tuitions, even in the EUB, they're being maximized, or they're being paid for abroad. We're not really capitalizing it. The loss of the talent pool, and also the reduction in welfare and economic growth. These are negative effects. Now, there are many also positive effects. The migrants, of course, send remittances, a lot of money sent back home. The increase in the skill stock, this is a very interesting phenomenon. When I know that I have a potential to leave, I tend to study more in my country. So I tend to learn languages, I tend to learn more skills, so that I'm prepared to migrate. So this expectation of migration creates a competition for learning, and therefore people tend to be more educated in Lebanon. So this is a positive effect. Of course, when people leave, you have less people, and therefore less unemployment. And this is maybe good for the government. And then potential gains from return migrants and knowledge transfer. So are there really positive effects? Lebanon received almost $4.5 billion. This is in 2006, in remittances. So Lebanon ranks in the top 5 countries in the world in GDP per capita, in percent of GDP of remittances. So it's here almost 20%. Number 2 now. Yeah. Jordan is very high, and you have here, these are 2007 figures. Yeah. So 6 in the world now is number 2 in the world. So we're getting a lot of money from our migrants. However, as you know, we're also sending a lot of money. We're employing a lot of unskilled workers in Lebanon, mostly domestic workers. The graph you show here, in blue is the money we receive, in almost red is the money we send. So these are the cash we send through our Egyptian, Ethiopian, Filipino workers, and all other workers. These numbers do not account for the Syrian workers, because we still don't have an accurate count of the number of Syrian workers working in Lebanon. So these numbers tend to be underestimated. So in net terms, what we're receiving and what we're sending, I think we're losing in terms of accounts. At the same time, like you can see here, there was a study done in 2005 by the European Investment Bank that showed that most money sent back home in Lebanon tends to be spent on consumption, daily consumption, 80% of it. And this actually joins your point that there needs to be more to gear this towards local development and other investments. So what should we do about it? First, we need to know more. Unfortunately, there are many scattered efforts to gather information. Now, our colleague from LAU will give you information about their project. We have a project in AUB, there's a project in St. Joseph. Where is the government? We don't know. Still, in the last household survey done in 2005 and again done in 2007, there was no accurate question on Lebanese migrants. When I talked to them, they said the modules were expensive and we couldn't include all the questions. But this is very important. We're sending 20,000 people every year, and we need to know more about it. So there's a proposal to initiate something like a national immigration study group that will get all the people working on migration together with international organizations and, of course, with the government. Second thing, we need to reduce the push factors. You cannot do anything about pull factors. I can't ask the Saudis to pay Lebanese people less money. It's not accurate. I mean, it's not feasible. So we need to reduce the living expenses in Lebanon, especially housing costs for young people. All of you know this. If you want to buy a house now, it's getting. There was a real estate inflation of almost 80% in 1 year in the past year, 80%, and it's even growing by the year because all the people who have their money in the Gulf, they want to transfer them to fixed assets in Lebanon, and this created a huge inflation in real estate. Who's paying for this? The young people, the graduates who want to start a family. They can't. Most people cannot marry before getting a house, and therefore they migrate to the Gulf to be able to afford their house in Beirut or the mountains. And we need to invest more in skilled public sector jobs. This is an idea that is applied in many countries. The private sector in Lebanon is not creating enough jobs. It's really used over real estate and services, so the public sector needs to step in and upgrade their skill force and get all these talented people back into the public sector. Then we need to make it easier for business to operate. Of course, reduce telecommunication costs, install broadband. We don't have broadband yet. Reduce the cost of doing business, fight bribery. Every time someone starts a business in Lebanon, they pay almost $6,000 just for paperwork. In Canada, it takes 7 days to start a business. In Lebanon, it takes 2 months. So it's unacceptable. And invest in better infrastructure, electricity, water, and like this, you know. And I think we need to make migration an option and not a goal. So what's happening in Lebanon now is people want to migrate as a necessity. And I think it should be more made as an option. Thank you very much.
The reason why this project is so important is that we are striving to make this project and the report that will come out of it the most detailed study on the Lebanese diaspora in these 3 countries to begin with. And hopefully in the 3 years to come after that, we will embark on the Lebanese diaspora and the rest of the world. Our field work is divided between Lebanon and between USA, Canada, and Australia. We are working in close contact with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've also been working with several political leaders in Lebanon, with political groups. We're trying to study the relationship with the diaspora on every single level in Lebanon. May it be religious, may it be on the community level when it comes to mayors of towns. We're trying to look at the remittances that are coming in, the amount of money that is coming in for community projects, for funding, the effect that the Lebanese diaspora has on political events in Lebanon, such as the past 2009 elections, which were held, and next year the elections that will be held concerning the municipal elections. And by the end of this year, we'll be completing our fieldwork in Lebanon. So hopefully we'll be actually issuing a report in depth to tell you about what we're doing. And next year, once we complete our fieldwork in Canada and Lebanon and Australia, hopefully, we can try to see the disparities and the problems that Lebanon has been facing when trying to actually express our feelings, what we need, or how we want to actually promote dialogue or promote community help or promote any kind of relationship with the Lebanese diaspora. So now I will begin my presentation in Arabic. I'll be talking about basically a little study that the Institute has worked on concerning the Lebanese in Australia and Canada. سوف أكتفي ببعض الخلاصات التي توصلنا إليها نتيجة دراستنا للحالة اللبنانية فيما يتعلق بموضوع التنمية البشرية والهجرة. لكن بداية ينبغي الإقرار بالحدود المنهجية لهذه الدراسة وتلك المتعلقة بميدان البحث. منهجيا تقوم هذه الدراسة على اختيار هجرة اللبنانيين من لبنان وعلاقتهم المتنوعة مع بلادهم الأم. ولقد تناولت أستراليا أساسا وكندا بدرجة أقل كحالة بحثية للكشف عن تأثير الهجرة على لبنان وعلى التنمية البشرية. لذلك أود القول أنه ينبغي إجراء المزيد من الأبحاث الميدانية لبلدان أخرى استقبلت وتستقبل اللبنانيين. قبل الاعتماد على الخلاصات أدناه، بصفتها خلاصات شاملة. ثانياً، أن موضوع التنمية البشرية والهجرة في لبنان لا يكتمل إذا لم يشمل على دراسة الهجرة إلى لبنان والهجرة الداخلية ضمن الأراضي اللبنانية. لنعود إلى نقطة البداية ونطرح الخلاصات التي توصلنا إليها. فما هي؟ 1. للهجرة اللبنانية فوائد عديدة بالنسبة إلى التنمية البشرية تعود للمهاجرين وأبنائهم، كما ولها فوائد تعود للوطن الأم والبلد الذي يستقرون فيه. مثل ما بنعرف أن الهجرة اللبنانية مثل ما قالوا دكتور شعبان ومس مارتا رويدس كثير عالية. بتفيد اللبنانية أولاً بأنه بيصير عندهم economic output كثير أعلى، بيحسنوا أوضاعهم برات لبنان ولعيالهم جوات لبنان من ضمن الريميتنسز يلي بيعملون. واهم شيء مثل ما قالت مس رويدس ذات ما وقت يبعثوا مصاري على لبنان او وقت يشتغلوا برات لبنان هيدا بيصير على little cost للبلدان المستقبله. يعني الهوست كونتريز بيسكلي actually اللبنانيين بيروحوا على الهوست كونتريز generate little costs to these countries. ثانيا، تتفاوت الفوائد بين لبنان والبلد الذي يقصده المهاجرون وعادة تكون لصالح الأخير. This is another message يلي بيحكي عنها 2009 HDR إنه وقت ينقلوا اللبنانيين من بلد إلى بلد آخر أكيد بيتوقعوا إنه يتلاقوا direct gains و direct difficulties. لكن دائما في هيدا البرسبشن عنا بالميديا وعنا بلبنان انه اللبناني اللي بيهاجر لبرا بيفيد بلد الهوست كونتري، بيفيد البلد اللي بيروح عليه، ما بيفيد لبنان. انما لازم نشدد نحن انه البلد اللي بيروح عليه بيفيده وبيفيد لبنان كمان بجهه اخرى. اما اذا اعتمدنا الفرد المهاجر وعائلته لقياس فوائد الهجره، فإن نسبة فوائد الهجرة اللبنانية العائدة إلى المهاجرين تكون في الغالب أفضل قياساً على فوائدها العائدة إلى الوطن الأم. الإقرار بهذه الحقائق لا يلغي مساوئ الهجرة اللبنانية على اللبنانيين وعلى لبنان ولو بنسب أقل. أما بالنسبة إلى لبنان فإن المشكلة الأساسية التي تولدها الهجرة هي نزيف الوطن من اليد العاملة أكانت كفؤة أم غير كفؤة مثل ما قال دكتور شعبان، والنسبة العالية لفئة الشباب من بين هؤلاء المهاجرين. من هنا ينبغي الإقرار بأن خلق نظاماً سياسياً يقوم على المواطنية والحرية وإنتاج سياسة اقتصادية متوازنة ومنتجة للثروة الوطنية وعادلة بالنسبة لحقوق المنتجين كفيل بالتخفيف من مساوئ الهجرة على لبنان واللبنانيين، لا سيما هؤلاء الذين يضطرون للهجرة بدافع اقتصادي أو نتيجة للصراعات السياسية العنيفة. وتستاء الحالة أكثر فأكثر عندما يضطر المهاجر أو المهجر إلى ترك عائلته ولا يتمكن من لم شملها، فتشتتت أفراد العائلة بين المهاجر والوطن الأم. كذلك ينبغي الالتفات إلى العواقب السيئة بالنسبة إلى المهاجر إذا لم تتوفر له أو لها الظروف الملائمة في البلد الذي يقرر المهاجر أن يستقر فيه. إن تعرض المهاجر للحملات العنصرية وإخضاعه لشروط عمل غير إنسانية وعدم توفير الخدمات اللازمة لتسهيل عملية الاستقرار في الوطن الجديد، إن هذه العوامل قد تؤدي إلى إقصاء المهاجرين وتحويلهم إلى فئات مهمشة ومعرضة لاختيار السبل الغير القانونية في حياتهم، وصولهم إلى ارتكاب الجريمة. إذن ينبغي أن يكون قرار الهجرة قراراً حراً وليس قصرياً بسبب التخلف السياسي والاقتصادي للبلد المرسل مثل لبنان. وإلى حين تجاوز المشاكل التي يعاني منها المواطن في لبنان ينبغي تسهيل قرار الهجرة من طرف البلدان المتطورة وتوفير الشروط الإنسانية الملائمة للاستقرار في البلد المقصود. أما على مستوى فوائد الهجرة التي تعود إلى علاقة المهاجر بوطنه الأم، فإن هذه الفوائد لا تزال محكومة بالمبادرات التي يطلقها الانتشار، أكانت فردية أم أهلية أم دينية. على الرغم من الفوائد الكثيرة لهذه المبادرات لجهة المساهمة في التنمية البشرية للبنانيين في وطنهم، فإن الطابع الاستهلاكي الصرف أي الغير المنتج لبعض المبادرات والغياب الشبه الكامل للدولة والقوى السياسية الأساسية في البلد في مجال إطلاق السياسات والبرامج الكفيلة بتطوير هذه العلاقة واستخدامها لدفع التنمية البشرية في لبنان يؤديان إلى تبديد العديد من الفرص والموارد المتوفرة لدى الانتشار اللبناني لجهة علاقته مع وطنه الأم. وهنا ينبغي الانكباب على دراسة التجارب الأخرى للبلدان المرسلة كالمكسيك وإيطاليا واليونان والهند للاستفادة من تجاربهم في استنباط أفضل السبل لتنظيم العلاقة بين الانتشار والوطن الأم وتوظيفها في مجال التنمية البشرية في لبنان. أخيراً فإن فوائد الهجرة على التنمية البشرية للمرأة اللبنانية كثيرة وتشكل أحد الروافد الأساسية للنهوض بدور المرأة في نهضة المجتمع. وشكراً.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rassi. So we'll open the floor now for questions. I think we can take we'll take 5 questions in a row to speed up. Just wait a few seconds for the media. Dr. Paul Tabar from LAU, who's also from the Institute for Migration Studies. Okay, so we start taking 5 questions in a row. You can also ask. فيكم تسألوا بالعربي كمان في ترجمة إذا بتحبوا. If you can present where you come from and a very brief question.
My first question is, you noted that there's been a lot of benefit to social, economic, the social, basically health and education. Is there a gender dimension to this? I mean, does it actually matter whether the immigrant is a woman or a man? And is there a difference in the kind of benefits that the sending country has? And my second question relates to something that Rima said related to this. She said that the benefits to women in Lebanon are very high in terms of immigration. And my question is, if what you're seeing is trends of high levels of consumption and a sort of trend of the male leaving the country, sending back home, and the woman is spending the money. Where is that evidence coming from? I mean, I'd like to see what kind of evidence is that statement based on.
Okay, let's take we'll take 3 questions, not to wait too long. So another question. Okay, I think answer that.
I will start with maybe Dr. on the evidence for the numbers. There is in fact a gender dimension. I think there's 2 things. One, what we talk about in the report, and 2, what has been found in other studies is that. Not to be too biased, but money going to the woman is spent much more on benefits for the family and for other things than money going to the man. So in point of fact, if the remittances do come to a woman and are being spent by the woman in benefit of the family, that is actually a net positive. But what you saw presented as well is that 45% now of the Lebanese migrants are women. That is actually quite significant, I would say, in the sense that, well, in various senses, I think it requires much more study as to why these women are migrating. Normally, when you hear about push and pull factors, the push factors tend to be negative. So if women are migrating more now, it will tend to be because of a lack of opportunities here. And if it is something that the Lebanese government wants to address, then it will have to address it by presenting more opportunities for women at the national level. But the fact of migration itself, it's not only remittances that come back to the country, it is also knowledge and ideas, cultural influences. And I think that also has a very direct impact on the gender dimension. But perhaps Dr. Ruedas, you want to...
راح احكي بالعربي. بعتقد غطت النقاط الاساسيه بالموضوع اللي له علاقه بالمراه وفوائد الهجره على المراه وقت اللي بتهاجر. يعني مثلا اذا بناخذ حاله مثل الحاله الاستراليه بنشوف انه الدراسات اللي او الاحصاء اللي بتجريها الحكومه الاستراليه كل 4 سنوات على المهاجرين وعلى البوبوليشن ان جنرال والديموغرافيكس اللي لها علاقه بنسبه النساء على الرجال بمستوى التعليم، بمستوى الوظائف، بنوعيه الوظائف، بنشوف انه في تحسن بارز يعني عند العنصر النسائي ضمن الجاليه اللبنانيه في تحقيق هالمكاسب، خصوصا اذا بتقارنيها على نفس المقاييس اللي بلبنان هون. المرأة هون قديش مستوى تعليمها، شو الوظائف اللي بتحصلها، شو المراتب الوظائفية اللي توصلها، قياسا على اللي بتحققوا بالاغتراب. بعتقد النتائج بتكون لصالح الاغتراب بهذه الحالة. فأنا بعتبر إنه الهجرة بهالمعنى هي empowering to women, let alone the cultural aspect and the social capital aspect of migration. It is greatly empowering للمرأة. بالنسبة للمرأة اللي بتبقى هون والرجل اللي بيترك بتبقى بلا زوج. I think it's also empowering لأنه what happens is that يعني بتاخذ الدور المسؤول الأول تقريبا والأساسي للعائلة بغياب الرجل. فبتلعب إذا بدك باللغة المبسطة دور الرجل والمرأة بالمعنى الاجتماعي الثقافي. وهيدي برأيي أنا هي كثير يعني بتعطيها باور وبتعطيها مكانة اجتماعية وبتعطيها قدرة على اتخاذ القرارات في إدارة شؤون العائلة ما ممكن توفر لها إذا بدك كمثل في حال وجود الرجل التقليدي باك هوم. عدا على المردود المادي للهجرة وكيف تتصرف فيه وقديش بيحررها من بعض القيود كامرأة كمان إدارة شؤون حياتها وحياة العائلة على هذا المستوى. فبعتقد بهالمعنى هذا الهجرة مفيدة كثير للمرأة حسب المعطيات.
لعيلة ما تعود الأولاد ما بيربوا معهم في خلل اجتماعي بقضية الهجرة لأنه السلطة كمان الأب وجوده كثير ضروري مشان الزوجة مشان الأطفال. يعني أنا بلاقي إنه هذا عبء كثير كبير على المرأة، مش بس في مفيد، في كمان سيئات كبيرة، وفي عم نشوف عيال كثير عم تفكك لأنه الأب مش موجود.
مظبوط، هذا جانب الآخر من الموضوع.
Okay, we'll take another question. Please don't forget to present yourself. Oh, go ahead.
حسن شكراني من جريدة الأخبار. أنا كان عندي الفرصة أن أشوف التقرير امبارح، شفت بعض الأرقام اللي فيه عن الويب سايت. لفتني الموضوع المتعلق بالمهاجرين إلى لبنان، الفوركاست لل 2010. بيقول التقرير انه العدد رح يصير تقريبا 760,000 مهاجر الى لبنان من البلدان المجاوره او من بلدان ثانيه. كنت حابب اسال بالنسبه للمشاريع المستقبليه اللي عم بتقوموا فيها مثل لايف لبنان بده يطلق قريبا، في شيء كيس ستاديز بدكم تعملوها بالنسبه للاجئين بلبنان او للمغتربين او للنازحين الى لبنان لحتى يصير في ما بعرف ينحط افق لتطوير وضعهم، ينحط افق لدراسه احوالهم، وهالباترن اللي عم بيمشي على اساسه نمو عددهم بلبنان. ثانكس.
It is because we don't have the exact figures that we're entering precisely into this partnership. A number of, as you presented, as Dr. Chaaban presented, there are some studies ongoing now that are looking into it. None of them have yet come to an end, and I don't think any of them are all-encompassing. So we still don't have the full figures, but we are hoping to get more information on that. I believe also that the Live Lebanon project itself that I briefly presented can be a mechanism for getting a better picture of the distribution of Lebanese migrants abroad. We'll have to see how we can use that to the best advantage. But there are studies. I think it's the academic institutions in this country that are doing the best work on this topic at the moment.
بس علق حول الموضوع هيدا نقطة إذا ممكن. أنا برأيي وقت نحكي نحن عن الهجرة لحد الآن البرسبشن الببليك برسبشن هو إنه خلينا نحكي عن الهجرة، يعني الهجرة للبنانيين اللي بيروحوا واللي بيرجعوا إذا رجعوا واللي بيزوروا لبنان بشكل دوري هلا مؤخرا أكثر فأكثر. في وضع برأيي أنا يجب التركيز عليه وإلقاء الضوء عليه، واللي هو ماذا عن المهاجر الذي يدخل إلى لبنان ويقرر أن يستقر في لبنان. وهو أنا برأيي invisible يعني لحد الآن، مع أنه في دراسات أولية أهمها بحب أشير للدراسات اللي أقامها وأجراها الدكتور ري جايليني عن خادمات المنازل أو عاملات المنازل، واللي كانت فعلا رائدة بهذا المجال على الصعيد الأكاديمي للتعرف أكثر فأكثر على هالفئة الاجتماعية من المهاجرين. طبعا أنا برأيي الموضوع كثير مهم وفي تقصير أكاديمي وإذا بدك سياسي وثقافي حول يعني إلقاء الضوء والتعرف أكثر فأكثر على هالفئات الاجتماعية والجاليات اللي عم تيجي تستقر بلبنان. شو ظروفها؟ شو نشأتها؟ كيف ممكن تتصنف؟ يعني مثلا في فرق كبير وشاسع يعني طبعا بين خلينا نقول المهاجرين الأوائل الأساسيين الفلسطينيين أو المهجرين الفلسطينيين، وبين طبعا المهاجرين بآخر 10 سنوات أو 20 سنة أو منذ الحرب الأهلية إلى لبنان. صورة معقدة وكتير مركبة. في عندك المهاجر مثل ما قلنا العربي اللي يعني displaced from his homeland. في عندك المهاجرين على النوع الأرمن اللي بعد عندهم علاقة بالوطن الأم تبعهم أو الإيماجن نيشن المتخيل، الوطن المتخيل، وبين انتمائهم واستقرارهم في لبنان، وكيف هي مركبة، وكيف كمان إذا بدك في صنوف من طرق للاستقبال لمختلف الفئات. يعني في طريقة معينة لاستقبال الفلسطينيين، في طريقة معينة لاستقبال المهاجرين الأرمن أو المهجرين الأرمن، وبعدين المواطنين الأرمن. في التعاطي معهم على مستوى الجنسية، في التعاطي معهم على مستوى الحقوق المدنية وإلى آخره، وصولا إلى الإثيوبيين والسريلانكانز والفلبينوز فهذا موضوع أنا برأيي كثير مهم، وموضوع الهجرة بلبنان لا يكتمل ولا يعني يستوفى حقه إذا ما يتم دراستهم وفهم هذا الواقع.
Yes, I'm Fadi Hussaini. I come from FAO. My question is for the HDI and the rank for Lebanon as 83 among the countries. You said, Mr. Ruedas, that the HDI depends mostly on 3 measurables, which are life expectancy, education, and standards of living. So if we say that education and the standards of living in Lebanon are fair to good, then the life expectancy must be short. And that's why our rank is 83, don't you think so? And why is it 83 and not, all the measurables are good in Lebanon, I think, in my point.
That is why I thought it was important to focus more on the Human Development Index rather than on the ranking. The ranking, the Human Development Index has been improving in Lebanon consistently over the past few years. So we can say that all the measurables are going in the right direction in Lebanon. when you look at the ranking, as I said, it's a comparative thing. And what it means is that maybe other countries have moved better on some of these indices. And it may be that because it's a composite, it may be that somebody's GDP per capita has, or some countries' GDP per capita has shot up for some reason, and their other indices stay the same. And so they pull ahead of Lebanon, which has better maybe education or health. You can't really. The ranking is something that comes up every year, and every year there are some arguments, why we are going down, why others are going up, we're doing better on this or on that than others. These arguments are not really very, very useful because they're comparing really apples and oranges. One has to really look at the index and within a country and look at the trend within that country and within that index. And in that sense, Lebanon is doing well, and the trend is an overall positive one. So I think we need to just focus on that.
Just let me add to this. I did some work on indices, and the HCI contains many things, including rule of law, corruption, and other policy indicators, and human welfare index. But I think what strikes is that we're still in the 80s, right? We're not 50 or 40. So, there is a positive evolution, but we're still far from the best countries. And this, I think, the question is why? What can we do to be more like Norway, for instance? In terms of education, I think. Getting some stability, I think, political stability and all of this. So we're a high middle income country.
You're also a high human development country.
Yeah, exactly.
Although at the tail end of high human development, but it is still high human development. It's not a bad place to be.
So 80 among 177 is not bad, but 177 counting, the small countries, the islands, and everything. So we still have a lot of things to do. So let's go to this side and we'll come back.
I'm an economics senior student at AUB, and I had a question regarding the numbers that Dr. Chaaban has put on the presentation. Given that most of the Lebanese migrants are actually high-skilled workers or fresh graduates that are smart and intelligent and all that, I wanted to know whether actually the migration and the mobility would actually do Lebanon good, given that all the ones that are professional enough or good enough to actually help sustain Lebanon's development migrate. How good will migration do Lebanon in that case? That's my question.
So I'll give you some answer, and I think Dr. Chaaban can also answer this question. It's true that most of our graduates leave. In EUB we have very high rates of migration. I know from our students that 80% are outside Lebanon. My class, 11 years ago, 90% are not here. So it's a trend. We see this, and people invest money in their kids to send them abroad. They teach them languages to send them abroad. Even sometimes I know people who went to German school just to go to Germany and learn German. I love the German language, but it's not common, right? There's English friends, and then they send them also to things like that. Now, is it doing good to Lebanon? Yes, because it's raising the skill level. Most people want to learn and learn languages and get a better education. It's getting us in touch with the technology in the world and getting in contact with the companies. And the problem is, how linked are these migrants to their home country? And this, I think, one of the building blocks of the Lebanon project or any other project is how can we make sure that these migrants are still related to not only coming back in the summer, spending some money and leaving. And are they sending technological skills? Are they bringing back some expertise? Are they sending money investments in the right place? They're benefiting of course, their home countries. Now, remember that Lebanon is very small. We're 4 million with 500,000 abroad. Compared to India, India's migration pool is huge, and they are benefiting Silicon Valley and others, right? So in comparative terms, we still have to be a bit modest in our. It's good to tolerate some migration. I don't think it's that bad, but The bad thing is how connected are they to their home country? How involved are they in the political process? Do they come back and vote in their villages? Do they know their representatives? Do they ask for water networks in their village? Do they ask for a better environment in their villages? I don't know. I tend to think not.
يعني حول هذا الموضوع يعني تاريخيا اذا بدك اللبناني كان يعلم ابنه او اساسا ابنه مجتمع ذكوري كبير مشان يامن له وظيفه بالدوله يعني هلا بعتقد انه صار في تعليم support of what the doctor has already mentioned. التعليم صار هو فعلا كثير يعني موجه لتلبيه السوق العالمي اللي حاجته اللي عنده حاجه للمتخرجين بمختلف القطاعات. فنحن عندنا فعلا يعني عندنا جامعات بتصدر سلعه اسمها المتخرج الى يعني العالم العربي والى اوروبا والى امريكا واستراليا والى اخره. هذا بما يتعلق بهجره السكيلد وهايلي سكيلد وبروفيشنال بيبل بلبنان. صحيح انا بقدر ضيف او بالاحرى اكد على اللي قال انه هون القصه قديش لبنان عم بيستفيد سؤال كبير. ولحد الان خليني اكد لك على شغله حسب دراساتي اللي انا عملتها اساسا على استراليا. المبادره متروكه بشكل كثير واضح وكثير ايجابي، يعني اتس بليسنج اند اتس كيرس للانتشار اللبناني، للمبادرات الفرديه ولا التنظيمات والمنظمات الاهليه. بركز على كلمه الاهليه وليس المدنيه، لانه طابعها اهلي اي طابعها عائلي قروي اكثر من يكون طابع يعني public in nature الوطن. وهون بالمناسبه رغم يعني ضيق الافق اللي المبادرات اللي بيطلقها الانتشار اللبناني، رغم ضيق الافق تبعها بتصوري انا كثير مفيده، ودراستها كمان غير كافيه لتبيان تاثيرها الايجابي على لبنان، تاثيرها من مستوى اذا بدك ضيعه وجعل العائله اللي عندها افراد لها بالاغتراب انها تتحمل مصاعب الحياه اليوميه الى مستوى اذا بدك اخر تجليات المستوى العام لهذا التاثير. كانت الانتخابات اللي صارت بلبنان واللي تم على اساسها تحشيد وموبلايزيشن لاعداد كبيره من المغتربين ليشاركوا في العمليه الانتخابيه. هلا في مبادرات تاريخيه بالدوله اللبنانيه، وهذا النقص الكبير انا بتقديري بهالموضوع. في مبادرات بدات بعتقد مع الرئيس وائل شهاب وقت اطلق تاسيس جامعه ثقافيه في العالم، واللي هي على مستوى مركزي ويعني دولتي من الدوله، وهيدي كلنا بنعرف بعدها موجوده وانما تعاني من مشاكل وانقسامات سياسيه رهيبه مثل اي مؤسسه تعود الى الدوله اللبنانيه. في مبادره اخيره كثير ايجابيه صارت واللي اعطاء حق المغترب في وطن الاقامه انه ينتخب ب 2013، وانا برايي هي المبادره اللي اطلقها الوزير بارود كثير ايجابيه وكثير اساسيه، وشرط انه ما لازم تتبدل. وهون انا برايي في دور للاغتراب للانتشار اللبناني وللمجتمع الاهلي اللبناني انه ما يبدلوا هالفرصه وتنحط على الرف وما يتم تطبيقها بالانتخابات القادمه، لانه فتح المجال لتنخيب او فتح المجال للمغترب انه ينتخب عن طريق جلبه لهون بيفتح الباب واسع امام الفساد السياسي والمال السياسي والى اخره، وبالتالي عدم ديمقراطيه العمليه السياسيه. اما اذا تمت القصه هون فالمساله تخضع لظروف وقيود وشروط مختلفه، وانا بحب اكد لك انه كان في عدد معين اختلفت عليه الاحصاءات والجرايد بلبنان، من جريده الاخبار الى جريده السفير للاحصاءات العديده اللي صارت عن عدد اللي اجوا وانتخبوا بلبنان بين 48000 وبين 120000 بعتقد الاحصاءات على ما اذكر. بس فيني اكد لك شغله انه دراستي ب3 شهور الاخيره رحت على استراليا وعملت دراسه ميدانيه بين اوساط اللبنانيين، اكتشفت انه كان العدد ممكن يكون على الاقل باستراليا، وبقدر يعني اعمم على البلدان الاخرى، ممكن يكون استتريبل، لانه في كثير فئات لبنانيه وعائلات لبنانيه رفضوا انه يشاركوا وقت شافوا الجو بهالطريقه عم يتم ادارته بطريقه فاسده وغير فاسده وضغوطات وغير منظمه والى اخره. ففي كثير عالم كانوا يفضلوا اكثر انه يتم العمليه الانتخابيه والمشاركه بالوطن اللي هن موجودين فيه باستراليا، وبالتالي لكنت شفتي مساهمه ارفع نسبه واعلى منسوب مما كانت عليه خلال الفتره الاخيره. انا برايي هذه هالفرصه هي اذا ما تم تحقيقها بالنسبه للمغترب اللبناني، هيدا بيفتح مجال اكبر على ربط اللبناني اقتصاديا وربط اللبناني ثقافيا وربط اللبناني اجتماعيا من الباب السياسي بالوطن باسمه لبنان.
Can I just go back to the HDI because I was just handed a more detailed explanation if you like. The 3 countries that moved ahead of Lebanon on the ranking are Colombia, Peru, and Kazakhstan. All of them moved ahead of Lebanon because of higher GDP per capita growth. I mean, Kazakhstan, it's obvious, it's oil producing. Peru actually also has gas deposits. But so it's all because of a higher GDP per capita rate of growth than is the case with Lebanon.
So, last 2 questions, please.
Hi, I'm a student in the Canadian University, and I have 2 questions. The first one is, do migrants settle in their host country, or do they come back to Lebanon often or to settle back here? And the second question is about the Lebanon project, which I find very interesting. And I was wondering if we could have more details about how the donors can know about the project, if they can finance specific project or if it's a whole fund. Thank you.
Okay, starting with the Lebanon project. About the donors or about more details on the project? Of course, the Live Lebanon project eventually is supposed to finance itself, but upfront we need, as UNDP, a lot of work on communication. We need to make sure that Lebanese migrants living abroad know about this, that the communities in Lebanon know about this so that they can transmit to their families living abroad. So yes, of course, we are making an appeal to donors if they are interested in financing this project. That wasn't your question. All right.
My question is more about when the Lebanese diaspora gives money to the website, do they know which project they are financing?
Yes. The website is going to be divided up by regions, by projects, by sectors. So if you go onto the website as a Lebanese living abroad, you will be able to, if you're interested in a particular community, give to that community or to that particular project that you have identified in that particular community. Or if you're interested in environment, you can give to environment. Or if you're interested in giving a whopping amount of money to something completely different, you can contact directly. So there will be a very varied way of doing it, but they will be able to see exactly the project, and we will make sure to update the website so that they can see the progress on that project as it gets implemented. So yes, they will be able to see to be very specific or very broad, depending on their preferences, and to see the difference that they can make at the community level.
On return migrants,
What's the question?
The question was,
are there people returning?
Do they just stay abroad or do they come back?
Oh, well, judging by historical records, of course, migrants don't, majority of migrants don't decide to come back and return to Lebanon. Only a few number of them decide to return. And here the category is interesting because people tend to retire when they reach retirement age, would like to come and retire in Lebanon. People come for marriage purposes. People come to visit family, and but normally, yes, the trend is to settle overseas and not to come back.
I think that depends a lot on the push factors, on the push factors. I think if you lessen the push factors, there will be more returns.
And also the region where they migrate. If you migrate to Australia, Canada, and North America, you tend to settle, and then it's how you migrate also. If you migrate to the Gulf, most Gulf migrants tend to return, but we don't know anything. That's why it's a big problem, and that we need accurate data to establish a trend. What we're witnessing now, and this is new, is circular migration. People go to the Gulf, and then they migrate to Canada because of better application procedures. So Lebanese, are smart in finding loopholes. So they found a loophole in the Canadian immigration law. And you're talking numbers. You're talking at least, I heard, like 3,000 families a year that do this circular migration.
But again, it needs to be established.
We need to know more. Last question? Okay. So thank you very much for coming.